Good morning, all. My name is Imani, and I am a cultural enthusiast. I went to grad school to study cultural studies, specifically preserving Black women narratives. So now I'm just out in the world, in the professional world, trying to maintain a good reading habit. The topic of this video will be how to pick out books that you know that you are going to read. I myself am a victim of, maybe a victim is a strong word, but I buy a lot of books and then they just sit collecting dust. So I really wanted to be intentional about buying books now at this point, if I'm going to buy books, that I am going to be intrigued to read. I thought of a couple of different, I guess, tips to help people like myself that find it hard to actually read the books that you purchase. But first, I would like to start off before I go into those tips. I wanted to share that the Schomburg, and I have this bag, the Schomburg Museum in Harlem, they had a literary festival yesterday, Saturday, June 18th. I attended and I stopped by a couple of, and let me, ooh, the sun, don't mind the glare. Um, I stopped by a couple of bookstore vendors, and one of them was Revolution Books, either Revolution Books or Revolutionary Books. Looking for the flyer. Okay, yes. And pardon the glare, you might see a glare because I'm outside taking advantage of the sun. But yes, here it is. So yes, trying to do the best getting you out of that glare. Okay, that might be the best thing we can do. But while I was at the Revolution Books, and my water's like in this thing. While I was at Revolutionary or Revolution Books, I bought two books. One of them is this Mules Fight Back book, and the other one, and that's by Kristin Richardson Jordan. And I also bought Salvation, Black People in Love by Bell Hooks. Trying to get a better view. Okay, there we go. And I bought those books because the topics interest me. And Bell Hooks is someone that I came across when I was studying in graduate school. I did study Black feminist literature as part of my studies. So I wanted to continue learning in that space about revolutionary love. So, all that to say, let me get back to the tips. Let me get back to these tips. Okay, so, oh, wait. Okay, I'll circle back. But, anyways, there is another book that I bought, and the author signed the book for me. So, this is called Sparse Black Whimsy, a Memoir. Trying to be better about not getting this glare. But it is by an author named Marcus Scott Williams, and he actually signed the book for me. So trying to get that, yeah. So which brings me to the topic of this video. I'm trying to keep it short. Looks like it's running a little over. I was trying to do it under a few minutes, but we'll just let it rock. We'll let it rock for now. So how I picked out this book was it was at the center of or for fiction. Don't hold me to the name. Center for Fiction, also located in New York City. I was stopping by this vendor table and, I noticed a black man, a man of color with dreads. And then I looked at the table and I saw this book, and the cover actually stood out to me. And as I picked it up, he said, "Oh, I'm actually the author of the book." So that kind of intrigued me. So I looked in there, and the style of writing really caught me. So first it was the the cover of the book. Then in this particular circumstance, it was that the author said it was his, and it was he was a man of color. So I was like, okay, let me check this out. Um, and I read it, and I was like, ooh, I like the realness of how he writes. I like people that write like they speak, and that's how I write. Like if you've seen any of my blogs um, previous to this or any of my writing, I try to write how I speak or how I think. I feel like sometimes we get caught in like, this way that we have to write that we forget that people are actually reading it. So, me personally, am I a perfect writer? No, but I think you get better with practice. And I also like to say I'm an authentic writer. I want to write from how I speak. I want people to read what I write as if I'm speaking to them. So that's the goal. And that's what the author Marcus Scott Williams was saying about his book, that he likes to write in a way that feels like people are reading his words. Sorry, I think a bug kind of flew on me. Hopefully you didn't catch that. But anyways, yeah, so that was a choppy way of me talking about how I pick out books, but I kind of wanted to talk about it even more a little bit in depth. So, first, I mentioned the cover, and this example that I'm going to bring up is a book that I'm actually currently reading that I got from Barnes and Nobles called Post Traumatic by Chantal V. Johnson. How I picked up this book was in Barnes and Nobles in a brick and mortar. I say that to say I see the importance of having brick and mortar bookstores, and I think we need to support them, continue to support them, and buying physical books. I know it's better for the environment to read ebooks, but sometimes, people, the tactile part of reading is part of the experience. So, maybe do a hybrid of doing ebooks and also doing, physical books. um, I, Me personally, I've tried ebooks, and I forget about them. Like I don't read them. But when you actually see the book, you're reminded, and you're like, oh, I have to read this. Oh, I have to read this. So it's the visual part that you're like, oh, I'm reminded to read this book, and then you pick it up, and it's like you're interacting with it, and I think that's part of the experience. So with this book that I got from Barnes and Nobles, the first thing that I noticed was the cover. The cover stood out to me. It looked very like, I don't know if modern is the word, but it looked very like just like edgy. It looked edgy, and I'm drawn to edgy books. So like deep, a little bit, a little bit twists. There's some kind of twist in there. I like books that are like that. Then I looked at the back and also I guess the book cover. That's like right here. I kind of use it as a placeholder from where I left off. I look at that and see what the topic of the book is. And I saw in this book it said a black Latinx woman in America. She's hyper vigilant. I see dating, I see dieting, I see dark humor, I see smoking weed, even though I don't smoke weed. But all this stuff sounded interesting to me. It's labeled as survivor narrative. So all these things kind of got to me and made me interested. I felt like, oh, I could relate to this because like dark humor, like, she seems a little bit, offbeat, like she's a black woman. Um, and, there's also a mental health component, and I'm also drawn to books that address mental health. Um, because I feel like it humanizes that that part of people's experiences. Um, so yeah, and then after that, so there were two steps I just listed. I saw the cover, I liked the cover, it drew me in, it connected me to the topics that I'm interested in. I read the back and this book cover part, and then I actually got to just skimming through the actual book itself. The actual book itself, the way she was writing, didn't feel like it was, she was trying to, um, like she was trying to write like a writer or how a writer would write in her head. She wrote how she would write, I kind of felt like. It's still written, and it's hard to explain it, but it's still written well. Like I could tell she's a good, probably academic, like fiction writer. Like she's still good, but I guess good is subjective, right? Um, yeah, good is subjective in this sense, but I believe she's a good writer. But I feel like she not only is she a good writer, she doesn't alienate the readers with too much like I'm trying to show you that I'm, this literary genius. And sometimes when writers do that, it kind of off puts the everyday or average reader from reading. You may see me swiping occasionally because, like I said, I'm on like a terrace situation, and there are bugs, occasionally little bugs, and also you're gonna hear some birds. So just hopefully you like a little ASMR because the birds will be chirping in the background. Get your day started right. But yeah, and so those are three tips I have so far. Look at the cover. Does the cover speak to you? Do you I think authors do a good job of picking out the covers that, or the editors, or the publishers, or the whole team of people behind the book. But they do a good job of matching the cover to the sensibility of the book. And another term that came to mind was sensibility. Do you relate to the sensibility of the book? When you're reading it, do you feel like either you connect with it, or you're not connected to it, but you're intrigued to learn more? So I see that as two different lanes. Like either the book will affirm your experiences, or it will expand your perspective on another experience and you're intrigued by that. So it has to be one of those two lanes. If it's outside of your experience and it doesn't intrigue you, or those kind of things, then I would say maybe hold off on the book. As someone that's interested in different cultures, I know I should tell you, oh, read all these books outside of your experience, but I think economically, I don't think, if it's not either your experience or it's outside your experience and you're intrigued by the sensibility of the book, then you might want to hold off on it. Of course, if you're a college student, if you're in grad school and you have to read a book, then you know read it, and maybe you will surprise yourself by how much you actually like the book. There were a couple of different times where I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this book. And then you read it and you're like, ooh, I'm so glad I read it. Because, if I wasn't forced to read it in these kind of programs, then I might not have ever read it, and I wouldn't have learned about this topic or this style of writing. So, long story short, this video, I was trying to make it into 2 minutes, now going on about 14. But I just wanted to share a few tips as to how to pick out books that you're actually going to read and they're not going to collect dust. Because this post traumatic book, like, um, I'm excited and looking forward to continuing to read it. And I have a feeling that I'm going to finish reading it. There's so many books that I started reading and I kind of just put to the side, but this one I'm like, I'm definitely going to finish it. Um, and I'm excited after that, or simultaneously, to read this book by Marcus Scott Williams, because it just seems so like even more real. It just seems very real. And I like reading books that are like you're writing from your experiences, and it almost looks like journal entries the way that he wrote. I'm trying to get out of the glare, but this is the example. It's like journal entries, like just thoughts. And I think that's also how I think. I think in like sometimes sporadic thoughts. So I appreciate this. And he even dedicated this book to, it says, for Manny Fresh and Lil Wayne. So I can appreciate that. I'm like, you're keeping it real, and you're bringing in people that might not, you know, and I don't want to, generalize people, but you're just bringing in people possibly outside of the academic realm that want to read but want to be able to relate to what they're reading. So excited about these books, excited about the other books, and leave me a comment below if you found this helpful. If there are any tips that you would add to this, thread about how to pick out books for leisure that you're actually going to read and you're going to enjoy. And with that, I'm going to sip on my coffee, enjoy my day, and I hope that you all have a lovely Juneteenth weekend. Later.